Hi friends, I'm Sarah. Welcome back to my channel, Sunset Bow Tarot, and welcome to the thrilling conclusion of my compressed 31 days of tarot in 7 days. Day 28, question 28. Have you ever turned someone from a tarot non-believer into an enthusiast? I don't know that I've ever turned anybody into an enthusiast such that they started reading for themselves or anything like that. I've definitely done readings for people where I think that they went in very skeptical and came out feeling like it actually did help them, which I think has been super rewarding. So I don't know that I've necessarily turned anybody into an enthusiast, but I think I've turned people from a non-believer into somebody who is at least interested or has been receptive to getting a reading and the messages that come out of the reading and finding it helpful. Which is, it's kind of all you can ask for. I mean, I don't ask for enthusiasm, but like, if you're willing to listen to me, that's awesome. that's really cool. So yeah, that's the answer to that one. Day 29, question 29, your top 5 underrated tarot decks. So when I think about underrated, I generally tend to just think about decks that I really love, but that I don't see around as much in terms of, being in videos or being talked about quite as much. So, it's not necessarily that they're even underrated. They're just ones that I just don't see around as much. And so I, like to mention them because they're ones that I in particular really love. So the first one that I mentioned is not going to be a surprise to anyone, and that is the Lion's Gateway Tarot by Jessica Henry. I think I have mentioned this as an underrated deck before on my channel. I really love this deck. It was a Kickstarter. It wasn't a very large Kickstarter. It ended up being an absolutely stunning, beautiful, high quality deck. Her artwork is wood burnings that have been oil painted. She actually just did a Kickstarter for the second edition of this deck, which I'm excited about because the second edition is going to have a different back on it, and it's going to be a little bit smaller because that's the one thing that's kind of difficult about this deck is that it is quite large for your hands, and so I struggle to shuffle it sometimes. So I'm really actually looking forward to the new smaller edition that the Kickstarter just happened for. And I love the artwork of this deck. It's freaking stunning. It's got this folk art quality. It's a little naive, a little primitive, and it just, the colors are bright and beautiful, and it's, it's very, very Rider-Waite-Smith inspired, and I love this deck. And there are a few people that I see, because like I said, I don't think the Kickstarter was very big, so I see a few people talking about this one, but it's just not one that I see around as much as some other really popular indie decks. So, and I think it deserves to be more popular. I just think it's so awesome. So that's the Lion's Gateway Tarot by Jessica Henry. Other decks that I think are underrated. I'm going to actually mention both of Peony Coin Archer's decks. So one of them is the Little Monsters Tarot. I have a slightly older edition of this from the year before last. And so it used to be issued in a poker size, so little cards. I think that she's reissued it now in a larger size, which is cool because you can, her artwork is very finely detailed, so I think probably on the larger size you can see the artwork better, but I like the little one because they're little monsters and they're on little cards. Oh, and here's the back. The back is this sort of cosmic egg back, and then on the front, all the little monsters are inside of their eggs. And I love this one. It has a really special quality to it where it's cute, but not in a cutesy way. You know what I mean? It's cute with a little bit of danger to it. And I love that about it. I find it interesting. It's an interesting deck that has this little bit of an edge, even though it's really adorable. And it has an interesting voice to it in terms of the way it speaks to your intuition. And I really love it. It's not one that I just get out and read with constantly, but there are those moments where I'm like, okay, yeah, this is the one I need. It's got a little bit of a dreamlike kind of feel to it, and I really love that about it. So so that's the Little Monsters Tarot, and again, that's by Peony Archer, who is Efflorescent Tarot on Etsy. And her other tarot deck, which I also love, is called the Efflorescent Tarot, And so this is what the backs look like. So the Efflorescent Tarot is a more traditional tarot deck. It's definitely more Rider-Waite-Smith inspired. It's quite a large, chunky deck. The cards are very big and they're quite glossy. So, you know, you have to be able to live with that. I think she gets these printed at a very small press. But so this is a little bit more of a traditional Rider-Waite-Smith style deck. And this is the color version. She has both the black and white version and the color version. And I actually also own both the black and white version and the color version because I really love this deck. And I do actually use it quite a lot. I did my year ahead spread this year with this deck. And it just, I think her artwork it's so detailed. The people have such an interesting sort of melancholy look to them. It has a little bit of just a somber feel, but again, it's special. It's got a little bit of a dreamlike quality. And I don't know, I really love this one. I just think it's really cool. And you know, I love her artwork, and I think this deck works really well, but differently in both the black and white and color versions. I probably use the black and white and color versions pretty equally, I'd say. Because it's just sometimes you feel like black and white and sometimes you feel like color. I don't know. But it's a beautiful deck and I really love it. So again, that is the Efflorescent Tarot. This is the color version. There is also a black and white version, and it is by Peony Archer, who is Efflorescent Tarot on Etsy. Another tarot deck that I actually think is pretty underrated, and I only got it relatively recently myself, and so I'm still kind of in the initial stages of using it, and I also do think that I want to trim it, but I'm still kind of trying to plan out how I want to trim it, and that is the Tarot of a Moon Garden. And I keep it in this pretty bag. This is a Bee and the Snake bag because it's a moon garden, literally, with a unicorn, which goes really well with the deck when you actually see the deck. I actually have a little bit of an older edition of this deck. I think that this is like one of the, I believe this deck came out in the 90s, like early 90s, and this is a kind of one of the editions that was printed back then. So, so here are the backs. And I know that, like, I think a lot of people love this deck, and then a lot of people like don't like this deck. And I totally get why I think the borders are probably pretty off-putting on this deck to a lot of people. I personally love the borders because I love how it gives you a feeling like you're kind of peeking at this little vignette through the trees. You know, there's like a little window into a world that you're looking through. And I really love that aspect of it. I think that that is really fun. I do hate the fact that there's so much white around the outside of the borders. So I do want to trim it just to get rid of some of that white. But again, like, there's not a good line to trim it on. So I've been like looking at other people's pictures of how they've trimmed this deck to try to figure out how I want to do it. But it's just, it's a beautiful deck. It's got, again, a very dreamlike quality. It has a, sort of a 70s, 80s feel. Like, it feels like illustrations that they had like on Sesame Street when I was a kid. It's, you know, again, I think this deck came out in the 90s, but it really feels very like 70s and 80s to me in terms of the imagery. But yeah, I like that feeling that you're like peeking through the trees at something. And I like the colors, and I like how it's nighttime and all the cards, and I don't know, I really like this one, and I do think it's pretty underrated. And in a lot of cases I think it's underrated just honestly because of the borders. Like, the borders are kind of what put people off, and like I said, I'm still kind of working through how I'm going to deal with the borders on it, but I feel like I can improve it with a trim if I just figure out how I'm going to trim it. So anyway, so that's Tarot of a Moon Garden. The final deck on my list of underrated decks is the Tarot of Prague by Baba Studio, which might be an odd choice for this list, but the reason that I picked it is that out of all Baba Studio's decks, like, this is the one I feel like you hear about the least and that you see the least around out in the world. And again, I understand, I think, why people don't respond to it in the same way that they respond to some of the other Baba decks, but I think it's really wonderful, actually. So the way that this deck works is that it's all, the pictures are all comprised of collage of various different artworks that are found in Prague. Oh, I should show you the back. This is what the back looks like. They have these pretty gold patterns on the backing. Mine is the 3rd edition. I think it's the 3rd edition. And so again, so it has a collage-y feel for sure. You know, like when you look at these cards, it's like, okay, all of those things do not go together. They are not all from a single artwork. It's clearly all been collaged together. But I don't know, something about it really works for me. And again, it's not normally an art style that I would go for as much, like this style of collage where things kind of feel like they're just sort of put together. Doesn't always work for me, but it's something about the specific artworks that they've used and just the overall feel of the deck. Like it has a really special feel, and I don't know what it is about it, but it really speaks to me in a way that I didn't even necessarily expect when I first ordered it. I was sort of, you know, like, oh, this is such an interesting deck, but I wasn't sure, and it was quite expensive to spend on something that I wasn't sure about. And it was one of those times where then I got it and I was like, yeah, actually, this is really cool, and it really speaks to me. And I wasn't expecting to have quite that reaction to it. So anyway, so again, this is the Tarot of Prague by Baba Studio, and it's stunning. And if you like collage or any kind of, you know, historical art or the city of Prague, this is a beautiful deck to have. But again, it's like the Baba deck that you just don't see around as much as like the Victorian Romantic or the Bohemian Gothic or some of the other ones. So the Alice, you know. So I really love this one, and and it's still odd to me that I like it so much because of the art style. But I don't know. I mean, like some of this. I mean, look at this one. This card is like a mosaic. I don't know. It's really cool. And it has just a very sort of magical kind of feel to it. I don't know. It's special. I like it a lot, despite not being sure that I was going to at first. So that's the Tarot of Prague. So those are my 5 underrated tarot decks for day 29. So day 30, question 30 is, what tarot card do you feel best represents you in terms of art, meaning, or vibe, and why? And I have talked about this question a little bit before in the past, and I did make a video about it, which I'll link in the cards. But just to sort of reiterate the high points of what I said in that video, there are multiple levels on which you might conclude that the Queen of Cups is the card that most people would say represents me. From an astrological standpoint, my sun sign is Pisces, so I am a water sign. My rising sign is also a water sign. I am a Scorpio rising, and generally speaking, my chart is full of water. Like, there is just water all over the place. I am a very watery person in terms of being a very emotionally driven person. And so on that astrological level, if you had to pick a card to represent me, you would likely pick the Queen of Cups, because I am, you know, an adult woman who has water as my sun sign, and also, like, generally speaking, it's overrepresented in my chart. There's also that sort of old school association with the quartz that's based on physical characteristics, where because I have light brown hair and blue eyes, you would typically say, using those very old school associations, that a cups court would represent me. So again, as an adult woman who has light brown hair and blue eyes, it would be the Queen of Cups. And like I said, just in terms of personality, I would go with the Queen of Cups. You know, again, I do think that I am a very emotionally driven person. And I resonate with the Queen of Cups a lot. Now, that said, if I have one stalker card that has stalked me throughout my life and constantly stalks me, and that I have a very special relationship with, that is actually the Knight of Cups, which I think tends to represent the side of me that maybe can go a little bit overboard in terms of emotions, maybe is a little bit too emotionally driven, maybe occasionally a little too romantic or dramatic, maybe not necessarily always having the most mature emotional approach to things. And so I do have a special relationship with the Knight of Cups. It stalks me. I feel like it often calls me out. And my relationship with it is such that when I see it come up in a reading that I'm doing for myself, I don't just always treat it as only representing the sort of basic meaning of the card. Oftentimes I will see it almost as a signal to me, like it comes up as a signal that a reading is meant for me, or that a specific message is very important to me, or that it's just generally something that I should pay attention to. Like the Knight of Cups is always sort of the thing that when I see it come up, it's like it's the universe sort of like poking me and being like, hey, pay attention to this. So I do really love the Knight of Cups for that reason. So those are the cards that I would say best represent you. I do have other favorite cards, that I really love in terms of their meaning and their vibe. The Moon is actually my favorite card. I really love the High Priestess, so there are other cards that are, I feel, cards that I have a special relationship with, but in terms of ones that actually represent me, I'd say the Queen of Cups on a good day and the Knight of Cups when I'm getting called out for something. So that is my answer to question 30. Day 31, question 31. This is the end, you guys. Last day. So the question for today is, what are your tarot goals for 2020? And my goals for 2020 are really to just keep really well to my daily reading schedule. I do draw a card every day, but actually like recording that and keeping track of it is something that I am not always the best about. So that's the thing that my goal is to aim for. And I think I showed, in a couple of videos back, the tarot planner that I'm going to be using for 2020. Which I've never used like a structured tarot planner before, so this is going to be new to me. And but I think it's really going to help me with that daily schedule of making sure that I write down the card that I'm drawing and not just drawing it and thinking about it and then being like, okay. The other goal that I have is just, again, to do more readings, and specifically to do more readings for, more online readings or more readings for people that I don't know. Again, I want to elevate this into, like I said, it doesn't need to be like a super thriving side gig, but enough to support my deck buying habit is about as much as I can hope for. So I'm really aiming to kind of like bump it up a little bit so that at the very least I can get to that point. So thanks everyone for following along with my super abbreviated 31 days of tarot in 7 days, because I can't get my shit together. And I really appreciate you all bearing with me, and it's been fun to make some videos again. So yay, back from the holidays, out of hibernation, and ready to face 2020. So thanks so much everyone. Have a great one. Bye-bye.